Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again. My name is Judy Blake, and I am the Leadership and Advocacy Coordinator for Family to Family Network. I am joined by my amazing, brilliant colleague, Leslie Lawson. She loves it when I say that, can't you tell? So anyway, we are so happy that all of you are joining us. There are a couple of people who I sent the recording to because they couldn't join us, and so they're here today. So welcome, Yasmin. So happy that you're joining us. So just a couple of housekeeping notes. Please remember, this is a very, very safe place. We know that there is so much information. We do not.
Judy, we can't hear you when you lean over that way.
Sorry. I keep forgetting. So we know that there's a lot of information. We know that you're going to have questions, and that's okay. Just know that we will take questions when the presentation is finished. If you're not sure about how to ask a question, if you don't want to ask it, if you're a little bit nervous about asking, no worries, just private message myself or Leslie, and we will go ahead and ask it for you. Please mute yourself because a lot of times there's background noise and it can be really distracting. So we want everyone to be able to hear everything. We want to finish by 1 o'clock. So if we finish a few minutes after, our apologies. You will be sent the slides once we are finished, and you'll probably get them tomorrow. So tip number 1. Remember what we talked about on Monday. This is just a little bit of a reminder. So the reason that we are all here is because of FAPE, which is free and appropriate education. So we talked about the IDEA and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So it's really important to remember that we are teaching everything that is the law and what your rights are under IDEA.
So we have the link for the IDEA parent manual, and I really love this because it's very parent friendly. It has sample letters that'll help you communicate in writing to your school. You can just change them up a little bit to fit your situation. And I will tell you, it was a lifesaver for me because I went through it, highlighted things, tabbed certain pages. I brought it with me. I know y'all's meetings right now are probably virtual, maybe not, but I brought it. I always had it on the top of the stack because I feel like parents are treated differently if they know their rights. And I'm a big believer that if the more you know, the more you will, the more appropriate education you will get for your child.
Yes, I agree with that. Absolutely. Really important. So I see that a couple of you just joined us late. No worries. We just basically reviewed what we talked about on Monday in regards to FAPE and the IDEA manual, and everyone will be given the slides. Also, too, by the way, if you had questions from Monday, we're going to be answering those at the end of this presentation. You wrote great survey responses. Keep it up. We really, really appreciate it. Ella, if you could go ahead and mute yourself, or I will mute you. Let me do that. Welcome. Good morning. I gotcha. You're all covered. Thank you. So tip number 3, the IEP. Remember how we talked about that, sometimes maybe a teacher is going to mention something to you over the phone, in the hallway, when you're picking up your son or your daughter, your loved one. Keep in mind, it has to be in the IEP. And if it was told to you verbally, it never happened. The IEP, it is the centerpiece of the federal legislation that we call IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Just a reminder, Yasmin, if you could go ahead and mute yourself, that would be great. Thank you. I don't think I can mute an iPhone. Oh, yes, I can. Thank you. So please remember that the reason we have IEPs, the reason we have FAPE, the reason that we have IDEA, we want to make sure that children with disabilities are getting the services they need, any related services, and that IEP is a contract. It's between you and the school. And I know sometimes that it can be really, really intimidating when you have all of these people sitting around you from the school district, and then you have the parent. But keep in mind, the parent is so important, and your input is vital to the success of any plans that are implemented for your child.
So I always like to tell parents that, it is a contract between you and the school does have to implement and follow what's in the IEP. So it's really important for you to know and understand every page of that document. And I know this can be overwhelming, and I'm very frustrated that parents have to learn so much about special education law in order to get an appropriate education, but it's really important. And I feel like the more you know, the more you will get for your child.
And you'll be able to advocate properly. Absolutely. Chinani, welcome. I know that you just joined us. We will be sending the slides. We pretty much just did a little bit of an overview from Monday, so you should be good to go. So tip number 4, you're welcome, no worries. What should you do before your ARD/IEP meeting? An IEP, just a reminder, individualized education plan. Some people say program, plan, and ARD is admission, review, dismissal. So in this case, it's either going to be an admission if it's your first ARD, or it's going to be a review. So it's really, really important that you have information and that you bring that information with you to the ARD meeting. Again, it shows the committee that you are prepared and that you're knowledgeable. If you're having an ARD meeting in, 4 days, and you've never even seen any evaluations, any goals, objectives, any plans, any scores, that's not good. I know they give out report cards 90 days, every 90 days, but that shouldn't be the only time that you ask questions. And it's important that you get that information before your ARD meeting. Why? Because you want to read through these documents ahead of time, know what everyone is talking about, and then ask questions if you don't understand something. We know that there is no way you are going to be able to understand everything. I've done so many ARD meetings between my son and helping others, and there's still things I'm learning every day. Leslie shaking her head, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I learn something new every day.
Absolutely.
I do think it's really important to have this information before, so you're prepared. You don't want to be surprised and get over emotional in the meeting. That happened to me before. Another thing that has happened to parents is when they send home draft copies of this information. Some of the information you might not agree with, so you can highlight it and discuss that in the meeting. Because everything they send you should be a good picture of your child. And I've even had parents tell me that when they asked for this, they got draft copies of IEP for a different student. So
yes,
it's just really good to have it ahead of time so you can be an equal member of the ARD committee.
Thank you. So evaluation. Know that all services that a child needs are based on their initial evaluation, and the school should always be collecting data and continually assessing your child. Why? Because we hope that your child is learning and growing. At the beginning of the year, they're going to be different than they are at the end of the year. So there is a timeline for that initial evaluation. But if there are no required deadlines for any other requests for evaluations or reevaluations. So if you think that your child needs additional evaluations, find out when it's going to be completed and make sure it gets documented in that IEP and that you bring it up at your ARD committee meeting.
Yeah, and I wanted to remind you too, anytime they do any new evaluation, they have to get your consent. That's a good time for you to ask what new evaluations are going to be done. You may have requested a specific evaluation. Like, get as many done as you can in the initial evaluation, because there are timelines though. And I know somebody had asked about how can they make sure that they can get all the evaluations done. Definitely you can ask for different ones later. Different things may come up, but in the beginning, ask that question before you sign consent. Know what evaluations they're going to do. And if you want to go to that autism target manual that we talked about yesterday, and it's in your slide, it has all different areas of evaluation, like reading, occupational therapy, speech therapy, social skills, and just go through that website and look at all the different evaluations. And that may give you an idea of like, oh yeah, my child might need a formal social skills evaluation, or might have some fine motor, gross motor, or sensory issues that need to be evaluated. So that's a good place to go and just kind of familiarize yourself with every area of possible evaluations. Not that your child's going to need everything, but it's a good place to look and just see what's going on. I like it too because it breaks it down and tells you what age it's for the evaluation is for. The reason I say that is when my child was really young, he was nonverbal, and they did a verbal IQ test on him. And if I would have had that site to look that up, I would have never let them do that particular evaluation. I would have asked them to use a nonverbal IQ test.
So it's time for the meeting. If possible, never try to go alone to a meeting. Again, it can be really overwhelming. It wasn't until the very end of my meetings that I would just go myself because I was so used to them by now. But for the most part, it's really, really important that you bring someone with you. And it doesn't have to be an advocate. If you decide you want an advocate with you, that's fine. But it doesn't have to be an advocate. Maybe you bring a friend or a relative with you. It's just another set of eyes, another set of ears, and then meet with them ahead of time so they know your concerns and they know that your questions are being addressed. I think it's really, really helpful when you have someone there with you just to kind of be there for that moral support. Maybe they're going to help you take notes and just remind you of things that need to be done during the meeting. And even though your child isn't technically invited formally to be a part of the ARD meeting until high school, I think that whenever you have an ARD meeting, regardless of their age, we think it's important that your child at least be introduced to everyone, especially if your ARD is like the first week or two of school. You know, teachers are so overwhelmed. There has been so much these last couple of years. They don't have to stay the whole time, but at least they can introduce themselves. People around the table can put a name with the paperwork, with a face, and you can just ask maybe some simple questions. What do they like? What do they not like? And then your child can return to class. And this just helps prepare your child for the day when they are going to be attending those ARD meetings in their entirety when they get to high school. And it will help because they're getting used to it now and they're being introduced to those ARD meetings.
Yeah, and another thing about an ARD meeting that I want you to think about too is documenting, because every little thing you say is not going to be in the documents, and they're going to take minutes of the ARD, but they're not going to write everything down. But if somebody says something important, or you say something important like, oh, Miss Johnson's going to be in charge of this on this day, or whatever it is, I like to look at the diagnostician who's taking the minutes of the meeting and say, would you please note in the minutes that Miss Johnson said that Ms. Smith's going to take care of this next week. You know, you want to document. Another thing I like to do is bring a list of very important issues that I personally want to cover in the ARD meeting. That way I can check them off, or whoever's with me can check them off as you go and make sure everything's addressed and documented in the minutes. And I just say, oh, would you please document that in the minutes? If it's really important and you want to make it happen, do that. Because 2 weeks from now, when you say, oh, but Miss Johnson, you told me whatever, they're not going to remember that. And if they may, but, and I don't want you to think I'm telling you they're bad guys, and they're not. But they have a lot going on. So it's really good to document.
Yeah, they're juggling so much. And I think that schools are doing the best they can. It's just very overwhelming. So during the meeting, ask questions. You are so important. You're such an integral part of the team, and you need to know what they're talking about. If they're using abbreviations constantly that you have no clue, or there's sidebar conversations and you're not a part of them, it's okay to say, Ms. So-and-so, is there something you want to share with us? Is there anything that I should know? It's okay to do that. Ask for support, ask for the data to support that decision making. And how is that data going to be collected? And it's really key to know that if you need support, ask for it and let others know that they might need support. Because I think that everyone needs to be on the same page. And if you ask a yes or no question, you're going to get a yes or no answer. So if you want to ask open-ended questions, that's going to be really important to give you even more information. You know, what is it going to take to bring Johnny to this level that we're hoping for? What can we do to make sure that my son or daughter is in a regular education class or this service? Those kinds of questions really help the ARD committee to really brainstorm and think of solutions. And William, I saw your note, and we'll get to that at the end of the presentation. Thank you for writing it in the chat box.
Another thing I wanted to say too is about asking questions. The teacher's going to be there, and a lot of the teachers are not really allowed to speak up and say if they need specific help. So if you feel like, I know somebody mentioned yesterday, they felt like there wasn't a good student teacher ratio in the classroom. If you ask the teacher, she's going to answer you. You know, hopefully the principal or the diagnostician is not going to answer for her. So that's really important, to ask questions you may already know the answer to, but just to get it out. And so,
and on record.
What, Judy?
And on record.
And on record. And another thing about on record, you do have a right to record the ARD meeting. You do have to let them know if you're going to record, because they will want a recording of their own. You know, I didn't do that until things got contentious. But if you do it from the very beginning, they just think it's part of your routine. Oh, I want to record this because I have a hard time remembering and I want to be able to go back, or I want to share it with my husband who couldn't be here today or whatever. I just think it's a good idea if, if you feel like you need it.
Yeah, I never had to, and I never did, but I know parents who do. And I think that each parent has to do what works for them. Just let them know ahead of time that you're going to be doing that.
Right.
So during the school year, and I touched on this, a little bit before, you don't want to wait until a yearly ARD meeting to be having conversations about your child. You also don't want to wait until a report card comes out to know that they're going to be really struggling in an area that they might need help in. I'm not saying that communication is going to be every day. I think that's impossible for teachers to do. But maybe send you something every week. Sometimes people have a notebook, a folder, and the teacher will write, had a great day, seemed a little anxious today, or had trouble with this concept, something like that. But I think it's really hard if your child has, 15 other students in the room, you're not going to get this detailed report every day. And I don't think that's realistic. But I think that you can certainly, every several days, how is my son doing? Have them write something down for you so that you have records. Keep the data, collect the data, because you don't want there to be any surprises when that report card comes out or when you have that ARD meeting. And you
Right. So
go ahead, I'm sorry.
So I was going to say too, probably what's going to happen for a lot of the children, or like for my child, he got a regular report card, but he also got an IEP report card, and it had like percentages on it, or it might say, like if his said he was supposed to do something 4 out of 5 times, or at 70% of the time. I wanted to know, how did they get that? Well, if they're not collecting data, they're just making it up. So it would be like your typical child going to school and the teacher never recording their homework grades, never recording their test grades. And at the end of the 6 or 9 weeks, whatever it is these days, saying, Susie, I think she's going to get an 80%. So you don't want that to happen. There should be data that backs up the progress they're making or not making.
We've talked about it and it bears repeating. You have to document everything. Teachers are juggling so many students, guidance counselors, principals, special education chairpersons. They have so many meetings, and you really need to make sure that it is in writing. Make sure you understand the procedural safeguards, and we're going to touch on that a little bit more on Friday. And we gave you the link so that you could get a copy of the procedural safeguards. And regarding prior written notice, know your rights on page 2 and what's required when the school wants to do something or refuses to provide a service. And I think that this is something that parents think they don't have any control over, and you do. No one can evaluate your child without your written permission. And if you ask for an evaluation about something and they say, no, we don't need to do that, well, they need to provide a reason why. And it's okay to question. You want to get along, you want to work together. I usually had very good relationships with all of my son's schools, and they were in public school from elementary through high school. And I think you can work together to be successful for the outcome of your child. I think a lot of times it's tone of voice, it's how you ask, and working together. And if a teacher forgot, okay, they forgot, no problem. Let's address it. Let's move on. We just don't, we don't want weeks and months to go by and nothing happened.
Another thing too, a lot of parents will say, oh, well, I emailed them and they called me back on the phone.
Great
okay,
point.
If that happens, soon as you hang up, you're gonna email them back and say, as per our conversation today, I understood you to say this, this, this. Because if it's not in writing, it's not going to happen. A lot of parents say, or call up and say, well, they did this and they did that. Okay, well, really, if you know your procedural safeguards, they can't do anything or not do something unless you've signed your name and checked a little box that says agree or disagree. Because if you disagree and you don't know your procedural safeguards, that's just like agreeing, because that means you didn't do anything and they get to do what they want. So it's really important to understand your rights, what to do if you don't agree.
And that's a really good point you brought up, Leslie, about if they call you, say you've emailed and then they call you, or say you didn't even email and they call you and say, hey, we want to ask you about this. Is this okay? Or this happened today. You want to then follow up. It's fine to take somebody's call from the school, but then you want to follow up and document it and make sure that you understood them correctly. And if you didn't, they need to reply back.
Right.
And they need to reply back anyway to make sure that you did understand it correctly.
Right, because I can't tell you how many times I've told somebody to do that, and then they immediately get an email back saying, oh, I'm sorry, you misunderstood what I said.
Right.
So we want to make sure we're all on the same page, because 2 weeks down the road, you don't want to come back and say, well, you told me you were going to do this. And they're like, what are you talking about? Okay.
Exactly. So make sure you send an email to document it and to make sure you get a reply. Sometimes emails get caught in cyberspace somewhere. Sometimes they're in spam. Sometimes they read it but didn't reply. Make sure you get a reply. So tip number 10, be educated. We realize that when your child is born, you just think everything's going to move along. And sometimes that doesn't quite happen, and you need to know more than you thought you did. Learn about your child's disability. Learn how it affects them, because no two child with Down syndrome are alike. No two child with autism are alike, or any type of disability. So make sure that you know the process of special education. Attend trainings. One thing that I do want to caution you about is that the internet can be a wonderful thing. And Facebook groups can be a wonderful thing to connect with other parents, and we encourage that. I advertise and promote our programs on Facebook all the time. But keep in mind, there's a big difference between fact and opinion. Facts have been proven. Opinion is oftentimes somebody's interpretation of those facts and how they think it applies to their child. So if you want credible websites, typically the ones that we have suggested to you, we mentioned them the other day, Navigate Life Texas, Texas Project First, certainly the IDEA website, any documents that we're sending you, those are facts. And it's important to make sure that you understand them. But if you're going into a chat group on a mom's Facebook group or a parenting Facebook group, and you're asking somebody what the process is, it's going to be their interpretation, and they could be right, but they may not be right. So you want to make sure that you have accurate facts again. And those websites again, and we're going to go over them. They are Texas Project First, and Texas and First is written out. It's texasprojectfirst.org, and Navigate Life Texas, and Texas is written out. So make sure you use an ARD agenda to keep yourself organized during the meeting. You can print off this page. The website I just mentioned, Texas Project First, if you click on that link, and I'll be sending you the slide deck, so no worries. What you can do is you click on that link, you print off the ARD agenda, and then you can follow it along so you know what to expect next in the ARD meeting. And use the tools that are provided you to help you understand special education. The guide to the ARD process, procedural safeguards, there's dispute resolution handbook. A really cool website is the Parent Companion, and we'll list that as well. And that's if your child is age 0 to 6. And that's a really nice website too. It's a Parent Companion guide.
Yeah, the ARD agenda is really important too, and your school may have one, but you want to try to stay on track because they shouldn't be talking about placement at the beginning of the ARD meeting, because until you know everything else, the goals, the objectives, the services the child needs, only then can you determine where the child is going to receive their special education services. And no, the rest of the ARD committee should not come to the table thinking decisions have been made, because you're the most important member of the ARD committee. So they shouldn't have, they're going to have pre-ARD meetings probably amongst themselves to plan, but though that's just planning, and they remember they can't do anything or not do anything without you agreeing.
Organization. We know that many of you work full-time, maybe you work part-time, maybe you work multiple jobs. We know it's challenging to organize your materials, and we're going to talk about this more on Friday. But make sure that you have evaluations. Make sure you have any previous IEPs, those individualized education plans, report cards, progress notes, print off emails if you need to, phone calls, so that you have them. And we'll discuss this more on Friday. So if you disagree with the ARD committee, just know it's okay. You can disagree. You don't have to agree with everyone, but you must take the next step. If you don't agree with the evaluation, you can request an independent evaluation. And someone had asked this on Monday. Just know that it's not as though you can just pick your own person to evaluate and then send the school the bill. Let them know if you disagree with an evaluation, you want an independent evaluation. They need to know before you do it.
Right. There's a sample letter to request that in that parent manual also.
And Leslie, can you take, I have to do something real quick. Can you please
Yeah.
take over at this point? Thank you.
Sure.
I'll be back in just a moment.
So the IEE, you don't have to pick anybody off of their list, the independent evaluation, but you do have to have somebody that's qualified and within the parameters that they give you. And then they'll get a contract with the school, but all that has to happen first. But again, that's why those sample letters in the IDEA handbook are so helpful, because I don't know if you're like me, I was like, okay, I don't even know where to start in asking for this. And when I say letters, you can do it by email. Try to get email addresses of the teacher, any important people, the speech path, the diagnostician, the principal, and the director of special ed. I guess what I always did, I always wanted to start with the teacher. And then if I needed to, if I didn't get a response or wasn't getting the response I needed, then I could resend it and copy somebody over their head. And hopefully you'll never have to copy the director of special ed. You may, but anyway, just keep that in mind, but you always want to give the teacher a chance to respond if it's something in her power. Some things are not going to be in her power, but just give her a chance or include her in the emails. If you do disagree with something in the IEP meeting, You'll be given a chance to make sure you get it documented why you disagree and what you disagree about. And you do need to sign your name and check either agree or disagree. If you don't understand what you're agreeing to, if you don't understand every page of that document, or if you don't agree with something, I recommend that you check disagree, because that just puts you into a 10-day or more recess. And then you're going to come back to the table, and yes, they'll act like it's the end of the world that you're disagreeing with them. And they may say, oh, you don't trust me, but that's okay. Just say you need more time to figure it out. You want to make sure you understand everything. So don't be afraid to disagree. Of course, always do it in a very respectful way. Yeah, and if you don't understand what's happening, because you don't want to come away from the ARD meeting, if you don't understand what's happening, you don't want to come away and well, I agree, but I didn't really agree, or I didn't really understand that's what they meant when they said this or that. So make sure you do agree and that you do understand. If you do disagree at the end of the ARD meeting, it's important to make sure your written statement of your disagreement is reflected in the IEP. It's usually reflected in the minutes. If you don't have a statement of disagreement, they may think that you are agreeing with them. And again, if you disagree and don't take the next steps, that's the same as agreeing, because they get to do what they want if you don't follow your procedural safeguards. And so, like I said, there'll be a reconvene meeting or a 10-day recess meeting. The 10 days is just the default time, but that could be extended. Sometimes that is extended because maybe you're going to get an IEE. So you don't want to come back to the table until the independent evaluation is done, or maybe you need a little more time, or you need to get somebody to the ARD meeting that can't be there within 10 days. So it can be more than 10 days, but that's just the default time. And during that time, you're going to gather more information. And they're going to gather more information so that when you come back to the meeting, hopefully you can reach an agreement. Judy, you want me to go on, or you want to take over?
Why don't you finish this slide and then I'll do the next.
Okay. You can also request a state facilitated IEP meeting, and that's where they send in a facilitator. They're a neutral party, and they just can help get you through the meeting. They're not on anybody's side, but they just can help the process of the meeting and help you come to an agreement. But you have to do that within 5 days of the first disagreement. If you go to your recess meeting, your 10-day meeting, or however many days you decided on, and you don't come to an agreement, you would check disagree again. And if they get to do what they feel is best, unless you either do one of these three things. You can request mediation, you can file a complaint, or you can file for due process. And I don't want anybody to be scared of those things, because what happens is if you file any one of those three things, the first thing that the Texas Education Agency does is they ask the school district to go have a resolution meeting with you. And that's where things usually get worked out. Just because you file mediation or file a complaint or file for due process, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go through that whole process. And most times I would say you don't, because if you look up on the TEA website, you'll see there are not a whole lot of due process cases because they got resolved, or they already were resolved in resolution. But and I'm not saying you would do this for every little thing, but that lets them know that you're serious about your disagreement and that you know you're right. And sometimes that's all it takes. And they'll say, well, we don't necessarily agree with what you're asking for, but since you're so adamant about it, we'll go ahead and do that, because they really don't want to go through any of this either, because it takes time and money of their staff. So don't be afraid of it. Okay, Judy, did you want to say any more about that?
No, yeah, and just know that, I never had to do due process in all of my years. Never had to. So never had to do any of that. Usually we were able to work things out. So we just want you to be aware of what your rights are there. So create a vision for your child. So if there's so many things that we want you to take away today, but none of our children, no one ever rises to low expectations. And if we don't have high expectations as parents, school's going to have a hard time doing that as well. So create a vision for your child. The purpose of IDEA is to prepare your child for one of three things.
For all three.
Oh, for all three. Okay. Yes. Further education, training, employment, independent living. So everything that you do each year in your IEP meetings, it's like a roadmap. It's to get you to that destination. Now, it's possible that your son or daughter, college may not be for them. It wasn't for my son, but he works, or he will be working as soon as we can get him a job again because of COVID. So hopefully we will soon. But your expectation, your end destination, you want them to grow up, but you want them to be educated. You want them to graduate. You want them to go on to what we believe are meaningful lives. We don't want any child leaving public school and graduating to the living room couch. That's what we don't want. So going to those meetings without that clear vision of what your child is going to do after the bus stops coming, it's like getting in a car trying to go on a vacation and saying, okay, where are we going to go now? You have to have a destination in mind. There has to be a plan. And lastly, what are your hopes and dreams? Sure, you want to be realistic. My kids were certainly not going to be sports stars. They're just not athletically inclined. And that's okay. But there's something that they can do. Everyone in this world can do something. And when you have those ARD meetings each year, take the time, write down your visions, write down what your hopes and dreams are for your child. And Leslie, I am so sorry I have to step away again. If you could continue. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. So I was just something I wanted to say about that too is nobody has a crystal ball. And I can tell you a story about my neighbor. She lived a couple of houses down, and my son Cameron has autism. She had 2 kids on the autism spectrum, and her son, who was the same age as my son, he seemed more affected by his autism than my son. But guess what? Her son now, somehow something clicked for him. He got language. He now drives a car, has had girlfriends, works a full-time job. He can't fully support himself. He is on a waiver. He is on a Medicaid waiver, and he does get some help from Social Security. But I just want to say we don't have a crystal ball. My son Cameron, he has made so much progress, not to the extent that my neighbor's son, but at the time we would have never guessed how well Trey would be doing these days. So always have high expectations, because if you don't, then the school's not going to have the high expectations. And another thing I wanted to say, even I know several adults with disabilities, even significant disabilities, that work. And maybe they didn't go to college. Some of them went to the college programs for people with disabilities that are specific for people with disabilities. Some of them didn't. I know one of our, one adult that I know that we're going to honor at our luncheon, he has his own business. He has cerebral palsy. He uses a wheelchair and he uses an augmentative communication device, and he owns a business called Shredding on the Go. And he has other people with disabilities that work for him and do shredding. So just have high expectations. And then I wanted to talk a little bit, this doesn't really have anything to do with school, but I want to make sure everybody knows about Medicaid waiver programs. And they're very different from Medicaid insurance. There's a big difference. Medicaid insurance is for medical care, where the Medicaid waivers provide a lot of other long-term services like respite care, attendant care, some specialized therapies. I'm trying to think what else. They might pay for camps for your child to go to. They can help with supported employment, employment assistance. So unfortunately in Texas, these programs are not funded very well. So there's about a 15 to 20-year wait. So it's really easy to get on the wait list for these services. Get on it now. My son, it took 9 years for his name to come up, and it's definitely life-changing when your child's name does come up because you get so many services. These waivers do not look at the parent's income and resources. It's based on the child's income and resources. So it's important not to put any money or property or anything like that in your child's name. And we're going to send you the list, excuse me, of all the different waivers. You can be on as many waiting lists as there are that you think might apply to your child. At the same time, you can only be receiving services from one waiver at a time. And we're going to send you a comparison. So like when Cameron I didn't know about him until he was like 5. And when I first heard of them, because they were called Medicaid waivers, I didn't put his name on the waiting list because I thought, oh, it says he has to qualify for Medicaid. Well, not technically, because if you get the waiver, they automatically qualify if they have a disability that meets the requirements. So I had him on several waiting lists, and he came up on class Medicaid waiver first, and then later he came up on the HCS waiting list. And then I had to compare the two waivers and decide which one I wanted to either keep them on class or switch to HCS. So get on all the waiting lists that you think your child might, even if you're not sure, get on the waiting list because things change down the road. I know a lot of people that don't put their kids on the waiting list because they think they're not going to need them. Guess what? If your kid's name comes up when they're 15 years from now and you don't need the services, you just say no, thank you. And again, we will send you all this information. I really like on Navigate Life, they have a little video about Medicaid waivers, that talks about it too. And there's numbers. So some of the waivers are through Health and Human Services, and some of them are through your local authority, which it used to be called MHMRA. For Harris County, it's the Harris Center. And even so, to get on the HCS and Texas Home Living waiver, you call the Harris Center if you're in Harris County. and they get you on. They may also have some other services for you that are available right now. So it's really important to, get in touch with your local authority, which would be the Harris Center for Harris County, and Fort Bend, it's Texana. If you have any trouble or questions about any of this, just let us know and we can help you with that. I'm the parent liaison, so if anybody ever has any questions, you can call Family to Family and ask to speak with me, and I will try to get back with you and answer whatever question you have. And if I don't know the answer, I'll try to put you in touch with somebody that does. Okay, so, and I know people had questions. Let me see if I can ask. Judy's not back. And please don't forget to take the survey when we get through. That really helps us out a lot. And plus it helps us to know, try to make our trainings better for next time and to see if you have any questions. Let me go to the chat box really quick. And I'm going to go up. Sorry, I'm not as good with all of this as Judy. Okay. First generation immigration, where can we ask for help and support for the ARD meetings? None of our friends have experience. We even struggle with understanding the standard education system in the US. She is our only daughter. So definitely, I encourage you to take the information like the IDEA handbook and the parent and all the other resources that we're giving you and read through them and learn, because nobody is going to be as good of an advocate for your child as you are. But we do understand that sometimes people do need more help than that. We're real small, so we don't go to ARD meetings with parents generally, but Disability Rights Texas is our state advocacy agency, and they have lawyers and advocates on staff. And if you're having a problem, sometimes they will take your case. You can request their help either by phone or they have an online request. And another good place to call is the ARC of Greater Houston. They have the Right to Learn program, and sometimes they go with parents to the meetings. But even if some are, you and I have a list of advocates you can pay to go with you if you choose to do that. But remember, you're the expert on your child, and you still need to learn the process. So you don't want to be calling somebody every time you need help. So hopefully you can learn the process and do it as you go. So I mentioned the websites again. So, and we're going to send you all these slides that'll have all the websites on it, but some of the best ones are Navigate Life Texas, and you can search in there for any type of thing, anything that you're looking for related to disability. I really love that website, and it was written by parents for parents. The same with Texas Project First. That was a website we helped do to take the information from the Texas Education Agency and put it in very parent-friendly terms. So that's texasprojectfirst.org. And I like that website because you can search anything in the search button, or you can click on the age range of your child and get so much great step-by-step, easy to understand information. And I really like Disability Rights Texas. They have a lot of good information on their website, Texas Parent to Parent. Sorry, I did something. I clicked on something I wasn't supposed to. Let me stop sharing my screen. There we go. Let's see. Let's see. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing those. Did Did anybody else, if anybody else has any questions? Oh, I wanted to kind of go over, whoops, I lost everybody. Can y'all still hear me? Can somebody unmute and let me know?
Yeah, I can hear you. And see you.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear.
Sorry, I kind of lost it and I just have the, let me end my slideshow and maybe I can get back to see you guys. Sorry, I'm not real good with this Zoom. I talked about some of the survey questions about what one thing I still need. I talked about getting the evaluations, organizing a paper trail. So if you're coming from ECI, definitely ask for copies of any information that they have about your child. You want to have those copies. And of course, you're always going to get a copy of your IEP at the IEP meeting. I won't leave there without it. You may have to wait a little bit, but I don't want to get home and find that anything's been changed. So I like to get a complete copy while I'm there, if possible.
Leslie, I'm back. My apologies.
Oh, that's okay. I was just kind of going over some of the questions. More training on the procedural safeguards.
Did you see the questions in the chat box?
Yes, we just covered those.
You just covered those. Okay.
Yeah, if I missed anything, please let me know, guys. You can unmute yourself and let me know about the chat box. We did talk a lot more about the procedural safeguards today. And then one was about staff shortages, and I wanted to kind of give a little story. I know we might be going over a little bit. If anybody needs to leave, we certainly understand. I'm going to give you an example about staff shortages. So when Cameron was in the preschool program, and I knew there was the autism supplement, and one of the things was student to teacher ratio. And so when we had gone through all of the IEP goals and objectives, I said, okay, so I guess we're all in agreement about these IEP goals and objectives. I said, and the teacher, he had already been in school for a little bit because he started on his 3rd birthday and we hadn't completed everything. I guess we hadn't done the autism evaluation yet. And so when we said, yes, we all agreed on the goals and objectives, I said, okay, well, I want to ask his teacher, what student teacher ratio does he need to make appropriate progress on each goal and objective? Well, we went through those, and he needed, at that time, a lot of one-on-one support to make appropriate progress on those goals because he wasn't cooperative. And I said, well, it looks like he needs one-to-one on most of those things. So he needed a dedicated para at that time. Not every kid that needs that. You don't want that if you don't need it. I promise you. And it can be fated, but the person does need to be trained. And anyway, that was part of his IEP. So if there's staff shortages, I don't really know what to tell you except that's not your problem. Exactly. The school cannot not give your child what they need due to lack of funds or lack of personnel. And so I don't know if you want to do that, but if they can't provide a free and appropriate education, they have to pay for a free and appropriate education. And they don't want to do that because that's going to cost them a lot of money. So maybe that'll put a priority on your child's classroom to get extra hands in there to help. And feel free to call me anytime if you want to discuss that more. Somebody wanted more explanation on the autism supplement. Probably don't have enough time to go into that, but if you let me know, I will definitely send you some information about that. Judy, is that okay?
And you can absolutely. And just, email, it's Leslie@familytofamilynetwork.org. And Lupe, did you get your question answered? I know I had to step away.
No, my question is that, you know, my son is a first grader and my daughter is a third grader. So for my son as a first grader, I've never had a principal sit in the meetings. My daughter is a third grader, and it wasn't until second grade. And these are 3 different schools that she started having the principal show up. Her principal shows up and introduces himself, but assistant principal will sit in the meeting. But prior to that, at the other 2 schools, I never, my son's at his third school, never had a principal sit in any meeting. I'm wondering if that's normal, they're supposed to be there or not.
What about an
and then
assistant
also-
principal? They're just
Not even an assistant principal. And then also the teacher is there at the beginning of the meeting, and then halfway through the meeting, she has to excuse herself to go back to class. So she's missing a good half of the meeting. And so when we get to the ending and everything, she's not available for questions. Sometimes I request the nurse to be available, and the nurse does the same thing. She's there for the meeting, and then she's just like, do you have any more questions? Because I gotta go. I got kids to tend to, and she excuses herself for the meeting. So is this appropriate action? Should I be making sure that they're available for the entire meeting, or how would you suggest I handle that?
What I would do is when you're having your ARD meeting, I would probably say a few days before, I would email the principal, the assistant principal, and anyone else that needs to be at your child's meeting. Like, for example, I never needed a nurse. Your child had some more involved disabilities. So yes, you need the nurse to be there. And I would say to them, I've been learning a lot on this journey, and it is important to me, and it is, according to ARD guidelines, someone from administration must be attending the meeting in its entirety. And I would just send an email to say, I realize you all have very busy schedules, but it's very important that my child's needs be addressed. And I would
Right, I've
send
had
an
people
email
leave.
before- yeah.
I've had people leave, but I would make sure you get all the questions, like the speech path might come just to cover her speech
Right.
goals. And I would say, okay, they would say, is it all right if she leaves now? And I'd say, okay. But if they need to be there and you can't finish the ARD and get your questions asked, then you may want to ask to table the ARD meeting and come back
Right.
and finish it at a time when everybody that you need there can be there.
Exactly.
I mean,
In
you
its
don't want to
entirety.
tie up. You
Yeah.
don't want to tie up some people all day long because they do have to get subs for the teachers, but you do need the important people to be there to complete the ARD meeting and answer your questions. And then if you don't need them anymore, of course, let them go. But you always have the right to table the meeting if you don't have the required people there that you need.
Yeah, I used to let certain people go because they would give their portion. And then I'm like, oh, okay, great. Thank you for the update. They can go. But if it's somebody who needs to be there throughout, absolutely what Leslie said. And again, we realize that's really hard to do because you're not trying to make waves. You're not trying to cause problems. But at the end of the day, you need your questions answered. And it's
Right.
important that they get answered. And if the people that are supposed to answer them aren't there, then tabling the ARD is the only other way. So that's why I would make sure that you, why it's important that maybe a few days before to say, I realize that you all are working with many students. It is very important that the following people, and then name the ones that must be there the entire time, are there during the entire time of my child's ARD meeting. Does that sound okay?
Yes, that sounds
Yeah.
good.
I would
At least
send-
I would think an assistant principal, or
Yes.
another principal would
Yeah.
be there entirely, and everybody else can be there for their portion. But like for the teacher, like, once they go over goals and everything, if I want to ask a question, like Leslie brought up, the ratio said, what is this student parent, student teacher ratio that's going to work best to have gains on these goals. By the time we get there, she's already gone for the meeting. So, that was what I was thinking.
Yeah.
During the speech. How do I would address that? Do I keep the teacher longer? Do I go ask them later? I don't know.
Yeah, I would send the email beforehand, and if there's somebody in administration that you know of, email them way ahead of time and say, hey, look, this has been happening, and then my questions aren't getting answered.
Right.
So they know that you are going to be saying, and you're calling them on it, and that's okay.
William had a question about his daughter has a rare disability, and could we maybe pair him with another family? William, if you will call Judy or
or email me. Yeah,
or
email me.
email.
Email's probably best. And you've got my email address because I'm the one who's been sending out all those friendly reminders. Email me, let me know. And then, yeah, I'd be happy to try to pair you up with someone. Absolutely.
Right. Another question I had from one thing I still need is how to learn the best placement for my child, like whether it be PPCD, Head Start, Pre-K. And I would really love to have a conversation with you about that. If you will call me, and you may have to leave me a message. But I will just say, definitely go onto the Family to Family website, and at the top there's a really good article. I know it says kindergarten, but it really applies to preschool age kids. Why inclusion begins in kindergarten, and read over that. And personally, I think if my son can be included when he was that age, he was a runner, he was nonverbal, he had meltdowns, then any kid can be included at that age with the appropriate supports. And that's really in the spirit of the IDEA law, is children are supposed to be educated in the least restrictive environment with their typical same age peers. That doesn't mean they have to do everything that the other kids are doing, but also with the appropriate supports and services. And I can't imagine any child that can't be included in a regular ed placement with appropriate support. But the appropriate support is really important, because inclusion done wrong is probably worse than segregation.
That's right.
So, like I said, if they were going to do something in the preschool class that looked really good, that looked more than just babysitting and doing puzzles, I might have considered it, but I didn't see a lot of really good teaching going on. And I felt like he could learn a lot more from his peers and having appropriate speech and behavior models. And when you get in a segregated placement, the expectations are lower for everything, for behavior. And then I will just say, definitely we have to get behavior under control while they're young, because we get so many calls from people who have teenagers or young adults who have severe aggression behaviors or self-injurious behaviors. And now they're 6 feet tall and weigh 195 pounds. And that looks a lot different than a 5-year-old who's having a meltdown. So
Things
anyway.
don't just go away.
Right.
And you have to address them.
And then some, go ahead. So
yeah,
sorry,
and
Jane.
it's really important that people realize that, because sure, certain things are meltdowns, tantrums, but at a certain age, your child is responsible for their behaviors and their actions. And if they're like this at 5 or 6, what's it going to be like when they're 12 or 13? Ella, you wanted to ask a question regarding getting a shadow for your granddaughter. I feel she could benefit from this. How do I get one? Does the school have to get one if I request it? Well, there has to be a reason why she might need it. And, you know, in your case, I know because I've been working with you, I think that that's something that I would discuss with the advocate that you were introduced to.
Okay, okay,
Definitely discuss that with them. Because
okay, all right. I was just wondering, does the school, will they supply one, or does it go through insurance? I'm just not sure
Nothing to
much,
do with
I don't know much
insurance.
about it.
Nothing to do with
Okay,
insurance.
okay.
It's strictly the school and explaining why it needs to be done.
Why we feel it's necessary.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
Right,
and that's
so-
something I would discuss. Yeah. Yeah.
So
with
they
the
have
advocate.
to, so that's a supplementary aid and service. So if your child needs a paraprofessional or shadow, whatever you want to call them,
Mhm.
in order to make appropriate progress on the general ed curriculum in the least restrictive environment, they are supposed to provide that before they put them in a segregated environment. Okay. A lot of times we don't see that, but once you get put in a segregated environment, I think it's really hard to work your way out of that.
Mhm.
So like my son did have
Okay.
a shadow, and that was part of his autism supplement too. I mean, you don't have to have autism specifically, but yeah. So if your child cannot make appropriate progress on the regular education curriculum without support from a paraprofessional, then they need to provide that paraprofessional.
And someone had asked, you know, what is a shadow? So basically that's like an aide, a paraprofessional, they call it. They change the names, you know, depending on where you're at. But basically it's someone who is assigned to your child to make sure that their needs are being met and that they're being supported in the classroom.
Yeah. Somebody else had asked about as much training as possible. So I encourage you to, I don't think you can sign up online, Judy, for family to family to get the e-digest. But definitely follow our Facebook page or sign up to get our e-digest. And we post a lot of trainings on there that parents can take part in. Most of them are free. And that is really important because I'll tell you, so my son's now 29, but I'm still taking trainings because now I'm dealing with the whole adult side of everything. And I learn something new with every training, even at this point.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
if you need help finding some good trainings, give us a call or email us and we'll help you with that.
Yeah, and look on Facebook, like on our Facebook page, we post a lot of things there too. So it is 1:17 and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Again, I'm so sorry I had to step away a couple of times. Leslie, thank you for taking over. Email us with any questions. We are going to wrap things up on Friday. We're also going to talk about organization and any additional questions that you have. Please make sure that you type them in your survey link in the notes. And I know we posted the survey link. In fact, it's the same one as before. But please make sure that you answer the questions in the survey so that we make sure that we're on the right track with these trainings. So thank you so much for joining us. Leslie, if you could stay on for just a moment. And we look forward to seeing you all again on Friday at 12 o'clock. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.